Problems, or is it a convenient excuse? We brought in two former CEOs to tell us. Gordon Bethune is the former CEO of Continental Airlines and a CNBC contributor, and Bill George is former CEO of Medtronic, Harvard Business School professor. Guys, good morning to both of you. Good to see you.
Morning, Carl. Good to see you.
Morning, Carl.
Gordon, it's been, I heard someone the other day call it sort of like how retailers blame the weather. Would you be doing this if you were still in the chair?
Well, you know, there's nothing out of Washington that is inspiring confidence, so you've got to give them some credit for what's going on. Every circus needs a ringmaster and to control the animals, and it doesn't look like it's working.
Yeah, but is it enough to say, for a CEO to say, it's affecting my business? I am not hiring because of this, or I believe my sales are weak because of this. Is there an element of truth to that?
Well, yes, most boards want a business plan before they'll do huge capital spending outlay, so all of those kind of things tie into the certainty of the marketplace. When you have tax reform, is your industry going to be part of the reform or not? All that uncertainty just delays decisions on expansion.
Bill, I think some might argue if it's not, it may not account for all of the problems, but it certainly might be on the margin, right? If you're trying to calculate the cost or the return on an investment, a big capital outlay, this might affect your calculations just enough to say maybe it's better not to go ahead with it.
More than not just enough, Carl. I think there's no question that of the big global companies like Caterpillar, who, by the way, is doing a fantastic job. The revenues are up 37%. They've added 6,000 American jobs. They're a role model for what we want to have. Those big global companies have choices. And with emerging markets growing 9 to 10%, and the U.S. and Europe growing at less than 2%, no wonder that they're focusing on productivity and they're not making the investments, and the climate here is not attractive. Regulations all over the place. Now, small businessmen have a particular problem because they have to invest in the United States. They don't have those global businesses fall back on. And the ones I've talked to are just holding back. They don't know what health care is going to cost them. And there's a great deal of uncertainty. And I honestly don't think, Carl, that the group in Washington, Republicans or Democrats, are serious about the economy and serious about jobs.
Yeah.
They're fighting over political ideology.
But when Steve Wynn comes out and calls the president a wet blanket for business, do you agree with that? And if you don't, do you think there are other CEOs who are not saying it publicly but are quietly egging him on, or are wishing more CEOs would say something like that?
Well, it's easy to blame the Go ahead, Gordon.
Go ahead, Bill.
It's easy to blame the president, but I think there's a lot of blame to go around there because neither Republicans or Democrats are focusing on the real issues. We've got, Carl, 26 million Americans looking for full-time jobs. There's no one serious about jobs. I'm not sure they're serious about deficits. It's just an ideological struggle right now for political positioning, and shame on them for doing that. We need help to be competitive with China and India, but also with a country like Germany, where they have political unity and they're doing superbly well right now.
Bill, you sit on the board of Goldman Sachs, and I bet there are a lot of people who might think that Lloyd Blankfein would like to come out and have some harsh words for the administration, given the regulatory uncertainty specifically to the banking industry. Is that the sense that you get, that banks perhaps are a different asset class, so to speak, within the industrial world, and that they are, in fact, suffering from this uncertainty?
Well, no doubt about it. Banks have been the whipping boy for the last year. They did cause a lot of problems in 08, no doubt. But I think a lot of the bankers I know are very critical. And the real question for our banks, J.P. Morgan and Citi and Bank of America and Goldman Sachs, is, are we going to be competitive on a global basis? Look, I believe in the capital limitations they're putting in now. But I really ask the question, are we serious about making our banks competitive on a global bank basis with Barclays and Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank and the emerging Chinese banks? That's what really matters, and that's true of every industry today. We're not serious about being competitive on a global basis, and other countries are.
Gordon, what about the very personal nature of the attacks that are now coming through? Daniel Loeb, the founder of Third Point, $8 billion under management, in his latest letter, he says it's increasingly difficult to avoid the conclusion that whilst Washington burns, President Obama is fiddling away by insisting that the only solution to the nation's problems, whether it's unemployment, the debt ceiling, or deficit reductions, lies in the redistribution of wealth. Isn't there a difference between, as an officer of a company, saying what you personally, subjectively believe about the president or what is going on in politics, and what actually objectively might be the case and is an unarguable fact, because it seems to me that there's a lot of people that mix their own personal political ideology with the statements that they make on behalf of a company. Gordon, do you think that's fair and right?
Well, it's hard to separate those, and of course you do have a parochial view of your company comes first, so you tend to articulate their views. They may in fact line up with your own. When the president talks about increasing taxes and redistribution of wealth, it creates a lot of uncertainty, Simon. So that's what the outcome is, uncertainty.
But is that guy right to come forward and say there's a class war going on here and I don't like it, or should he just sit back and talk solely about what's happening to the business conditions in which he's operating, rather than his own ideology?
Well, the consequences of being forthright sometimes are drastic, and so you need to, you know, there is payback. And so you need to be mindful that the government can make or break you in the outgoing years, and so you tend to bite your tongue because you can't afford the cost to your shareholders. Yes, I'd like to have more people talk like Steve Wynn, but we can't all afford to do it.
Yeah. Bill, a cynic might say...
Simon, let me just...
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, a cynic might argue, well, of course these guys are going to complain about the president because he's the one who wants to raise taxes on the ultra-wealthy in this country, and it infects their worldview.
Well, I think a lot of people, I think that's unfair. I think they're sincerely interested in the best interests of the country. Of course they represent their companies. But I do think a lot of CEOs, like Gordon said, are fearful of speaking out. But I think that's our job. I think we have to speak out. And frankly, it's not an attack against the president. I think the whole issue is, are we going to make the pie larger, or are we going to fight over a shrinking pie? Right now, we're fighting over a shrinking pie. This is all wrong. Look at Germany. They're making the pie larger.
So implicit in what you're saying is that if you slash taxes, you'll get higher economic growth and more tax revenues. And that is a subjective view. That is not an economic fact. There's a huge amount of other people that would disagree with you very strongly.
Well, I'll take them on, because I think we saw during the Clinton years of the 90s, when I was CEO and Gordon was CEO, we had the wind at our backs because the pie was growing and we were building the economy. And by the way, the middle class was healthy in the 90s. 22 million jobs were created. Today we're just shrinking jobs. And so we're just fighting over a smaller and smaller pie, and we're never going to get there as a country if we do that. This is not cynical. This is what this country needs to get moving again.
Yeah, well, the impasse that we're looking at today in Washington doesn't help, gentlemen. Thanks for your time. Good to see both of you again. Bill?
Thank you.
And Gordon, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.